6:38, Nashville's Morning News on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Want to get right to the Newsmaker hotline. Say good morning to J Antoni, Heritage Foundation, Fox Business. You've seen him there as well. And EJ, there's we're going to talk about the economy. And Larry from our Super Text line said that Donald Trump should send Susan Rice a check for writing one of his campaign ads, because Susan Rice was on, it was either CNN or MSNBC. But I want you, EJ, knowing what we know about the Biden-Harris economy, this is what Susan Rice said about Kamala Harris.
I think it's very important to remember that this has been the Biden-Harris agenda. Kamala Harris has been an integral architect and executor of the policies of the Biden-Harris administration. But this notion that she somehow doesn't deserve credit for and isn't part of and wasn't an integral architect of the Biden-Harris administration agenda is not only false, it's frankly somewhat bizarre and offensive. EJ,
one of the things that I find interesting as we delve into a discussion on the economy is the fact that Kamala Harris is out there trying to say that the economy is great, has been great, and will continue to be great. However, we're going to tackle the really high prices. It's like she's trying to play it both ways.
Oh, Dan, absolutely. And I just can't understand this narrative. I can't wrap my head around it. These people saying, oh, she's going to deal with inflation on day one in office. What do you mean your day one in office was 3.5 years ago? You're in office right now. Why aren't you doing anything about it? Probably because she's not going to solve the problem that she herself created.
One of the things and it's news today, EJ, and I know that it's rather early, so maybe you didn't see it, but apparently Harris is going to come out with some sort of an economic policy today. And part of that, and I'm seeing things on Twitter, part of that apparently is going to be that she's going to go after the corporations for price gouging. And what she wants to do is set caps on groceries. And so it seems to me like what she's trying, which I believe, I mean, you're a lot smarter than I am. I think that's tantamount to socialism. That's number one. But number two is she's completely discounting the market factors and forces that they themselves have put into play, whether we're talking about gas and oil production, the war on domestic oil production, or regulations, onerous regulations. Of course, we also know that they wanted to, and they did it in California, raising the minimum wage. And that was devastating to businesses in California. So it seems to me, EJ, what they're looking to do is they're going to blame the evil, greedy corporations, and they're going to cap prices, when in reality, what they've done is they've put in place market forces and situations that have forced the corporations to raise prices.
It's exactly right, Dan. And what's amazing, too, is the administration's own data proves their whole narrative wrong. You can look at, for example, we just got this week the latest inflation data, and we got inflation data not just for the prices that you, I, and all the listeners are paying at the grocery store, but we also got the prices that the grocer is paying. In other words, how much do we spend on that gallon of milk that we grab off the shelf, and how much does the grocer spend on that gallon of milk that he puts on the shelf? Guess what? Prices on average are up 19.4% for both individuals and businesses under this administration. In other words, all of the cost increases that we're facing are simply businesses passing along to us their own cost increases. I mean, that's a shot below the waterline to this whole narrative, this whole idea that it's somehow greedy corporations that are causing inflation. I would love to know, Dan, please have someone call in and explain how on earth all the businesses in America magically became greedy in January of 2021, and they weren't before that. It's a miracle.
Yeah, I think what they're trying to do is obfuscate their own failings. I mean, EJ, you and I have spoken before, and over the years, and we know that one of the things that they did was they signed all of these big spending bills into law, and Kamala Harris was the tie-breaking vote on these things as it passed the Senate, and that caused inflation to skyrocket. So they're trying to sort of obfuscate their own actions and blame others. And number one, isn't it against capitalistic principles to try to put caps on prices?
Oh, certainly. And your first point, Dan, I'm so glad that you brought that up. She really has her fingerprints all over the murder weapon of Americans' finances because of her role not only in cheerleading all of the spending out of this administration, but as you rightly pointed out, being the tie-breaking vote on literally trillions of dollars worth of inflationary deficit spending. So I don't know how she can possibly evade any kind of responsibility here. But look, at the end of the day, I think the bigger picture is the fact that the American people are hurting so much at this point, and they are so desperate for relief that essentially, I'm trying as best I can not to be political and to be aware of certain regulations governing nonprofits right now.
Sure.
But I think it's painfully clear to the American people who is on the right side of this issue and who is not. People understand under which administration their lives were better and under which administration their lives were worse. J
Antoni is joining us from the Heritage Foundation. You've seen him on Fox Business as well, economic analyst here on Nashville's Morning News. And so, EJ, when you look at what Biden wants to do, or Harris, I should say, wants to do, then you look at Donald Trump. We know that for 3.5 years or so, Donald Trump had a very successful presidency when it came to the economy. Of course, we all know what happened with COVID, but Trump's got scoreboard, and there's no doubt that he's got scoreboard when it comes to the economy. So my question then would be this. As you look at what Trump wants to do and what he has said so far in this campaign, do you think, given the challenges we currently face, Donald Trump is on the right track?
I think so, and I think this is also a bit of a unique moment in modern American politics because voters don't actually even need to listen to the promises that Donald Trump is making. They don't need to listen to the promises that Kamala Harris is making because both of those people already have records in the executive branch. In other words, you can look at what the politician has actually done instead of just what the politician is promising they're going to do. And what was the record of each of those candidates? Well, under Kamala Harris, we have seen families, although they're earning more, they can buy less with their paycheck. How much less? Well, for the typical family on an annual basis, it's about $4,200 less. We saw exactly the opposite under Trump, where real wages were going up, not down. We have higher interest rates today. That increases borrowing costs on everything from student loans to auto loans and credit cards, mortgages, you name it. In fact, credit card interest rates are near a record high today. Mortgage rates have essentially tripled. And so this has increased borrowing costs dramatically for families to the tune of about $3,600 a year. Again, conversely, what happened under President Trump, those numbers were flat. And so there was no additional burden put on. Under the Biden-Harris administration, we've had about $5,000 per family per year in additional regulatory costs get added on. Under Donald Trump, we saw exactly the opposite. Once again, you saw regulatory burden reduced by about $2,000 per year per household because of the regulatory reform that administration was able to get through. So once again, you don't necessarily, I think, have to listen so much to what these candidates are promising they will do. You can look at what they've actually already done.
President Trump, if he wins re-election, he's going to have a far different economy going in than he did when he won the election and came in 2016 to 2020. He's going to be faced with a lot of challenges. There's a lot that needs to be cleaned up. There's a lot that needs to be fixed. So my question for you is, Trump is supposed to make some sort of an announcement today regarding his economic policy. He's already given us a lot of his economic policy. We know what he's done in the past. What do you want to hear, or what do you think America needs to hear as far as what the former president wants to do if he wins re-election to get our economy back on track?
I would say first and foremost a message of hope. I am shocked at how many young people I talk to, and when I go through the polling data, and I see how much hopelessness there is, especially among young Americans today. They no longer believe that they will ever be able to do things like retire or own a home. The American dream, right? Yep. You have for the first time since the Great Depression, a generation of people who believe they will have a lower standard of living than their parents enjoyed. That's terrible. So first and foremost, again, I think it needs to be a hopeful message about how we're going to turn this big old battleship around, but then it needs to have some details in it, right? It needs some teeth. How on earth are we actually going to make that maneuver? And I think it has to be the exact same things which brought us so much economic success during the first Trump term. And that means regulatory reform. It means tax reform, and it means energy reform. It means restarting projects like the Keystone XL pipeline. It means reopening areas to drilling and exploration like Anwar, et cetera. A big reason for Trump's success in those first 4 years was the fact that you were unleashing American energy, not just here domestically, but on the world. And that provided benefits, by the way, that went beyond the economic. A huge reason why we were such a geostrategic superpower like we hadn't been for a generation was because we were flooding the world with cheap energy. And all of these bad actors around the world, like Iran, who are dependent upon energy exports, they had a huge punch to the gut because prices were down and they weren't able to fund terrorism and fund their war machine.
So, God, don't even get me started, EJ. EJ Antoni, always a great conversation, and we'll have you back. How can folks find you on Twitter?
You can find me there. The handle is @RealEJ Antoni.